says we're live on Facebook. Let me know if you see it. Peace, everyone on Facebook. We're on our, oh, you see it? All right, great. Thanks. All right, thanks, Comrade Dan. We're on our self-determination conference call, brothers and sisters. This is a conference call, but we're streaming it live on Facebook. The topic is self-determination. Self-determination, that's a term that many of us, most of us don't even know. Purposely, it has been wiped out of our vocabulary and out of our discussions. Approximately 60 or 50 something years ago, almost 60 years ago, that's when the word self-determination really reached its peak, when everyone who was oppressed, they were talking about one thing, main thing, self-determination, meaning instead of continuing to be oppressed, we're just going to govern ourselves, take over. If a minority group or racial group is under another race and they're being oppressed by that race, they have a right, this is in law, brothers and sisters, they have a right to say, you're not going to ever treat us right, so we have a right to govern ourselves. So even back in those days in the 60s, wherever we were, whether it been in Mississippi, in Atlanta, New York, wherever we were at, and wherever we are right now, we had a right to simply stand up and say, we're going to govern ourselves. That's when human rights was taking its height as far as public discussion. That's when even Malcolm X and Dr. King was discussing human rights. I want to share something concerning Dr. King, because Dr. King was on the right course. He was on the right course, and that course, as you will see in a minute, didn't include voting. Dr. King had turned against what he had just got for us, which was voting rights. He was instrumental, probably the key figure in us attaining voting rights. And as he was attaining those voting rights for Black people, he had meetings as well. We're going to go over the meetings Dr. King had. I'll show you Dr. King's meetings. That's Lyndon B. Johnson. That's the president at the time that signed the Voting Rights Act. That King and others were meeting with this president to try to get him to pass the Voting Rights Act. And eventually he did pass the Voting Rights Act. And also several years later, this same president killed Dr. King. Yes, it was proven in court, in their own courts, in 1999, that this same president, Dr. King, was sitting here meeting with, killed. Well, he didn't kill him himself, of course. Presidents don't do the killings, they just press buttons. He pressed the button to have this man who he was meeting with killed. So there's two lessons in this concerning the discussion and debate that we are now having that we shouldn't even be engaged in, period, about our brother Ice Cube, about him meeting with Trump or meeting with the Trump campaign with his plan for Black America. Of course, he's meeting with the power, so-called power that be, the one who makes the decisions and discussing something better for Black people. And Black people, many of us are dissing him because he's meeting with Trump's people when Biden's people refuse to even engage Ice Cube. Ice Cube is not selling out people right now. You just now turning against police because of George Floyd. Ice Cube been saying F the police for what, 30 years or so. This man been on Black people's side, but I'm not here to argue Ice Cube's case because it's a lesson for Ice Cube as well while I'm showing this picture. This man that Dr. King is sitting with is the President of the United States. The President of the United States represents white power. He represents white interests. White interests could care less about Black life and Black interests. So eventually his representing white interests had this Black man that he was meeting with killed, murdered, assassinated. And until this day, the murder of that man has demoralized us as a people. So now we are even scared to stand up with the courage that Dr. King had against power because we see what they did to Dr. King. So lesson to Ice Cube, there's no negotiation with devils, period. Devils are devils. There's nothing inside of this system, but we applaud the efforts of Ice Cube, but he needs maybe a little bit more political education because there can never be justice for Black people inside of this system, never. unless the system becomes majority Black, which we are a long ways from that happening. So there's a lose-lose situation. But I'm pointing out to two lessons in this. First, that's what leadership does. Ice Cube was a Black leader, whether you want to call him that or not. So he's trying to negotiate and talk to the so-called seats of authority, same way our brother Dr. King did. But a lesson to Ice Cube as well, the same president, Dr. King, did not represent his own personal motivations and morale. He represented the morale of white America and the interests of this nation, which the interest of this nation does not want to see the rise of Black people. So they eventually, and they really want to see the stability of this country, and this country can only maintain stability if Black people stay in our place. That's how it maintains stability. And Dr. King was a threat to that stability, so they murdered Dr. King. They assassinated Dr. King, the same man he was meeting with. So Brother Ice Cube, you are meeting with devils. So let's take a lesson from Dr. King. This is a lose-lose situation on both sides, because both sides must represent white interests, not Black interests. That's why our sister said this. Kamala Harris said this. Excuse me, let me turn the volume up.
So I'm not gonna, do you support reparations for Black people? Well, listen. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit Black people. No. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit Black people. No. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit Black people. No.
Now, mind you, brothers and sisters, we're not taking sides here. We're talking about self-determination. How that's the only answer. There's no answer with Democrats or Republicans. Let's make that clear before you get anything wrong saying we're promoting Donald Trump here. She said she cannot do anything that will only benefit Black people. At least Donald Trump did mention a platinum plan that was for Black people, but Obama said the same thing, that he could not do anything to benefit just Black people because he was not a Black president. He was the president of America. Why did he say that? Why is Kamala Harris saying this? Because something called tyranny of the majority. Listen, brothers and sisters, tyranny of the majority. Let's listen to what this is. Tyranny of the majority is an inherent weakness to majority rule, in which the majority of an electorate pursues exclusively its own objectives at the expense of those of the minority factions. This results in oppression of minority groups, comparable to that of a tyrant or despot. Now let me read one more thing before we engage in this discussion. One more thing, brothers and sisters. Allow me one more thing. I want to point out something. This is an article written by Cambridge University, not by Radical Ramzu, Cambridge University. It's called Self-Determination, the New Phase. This conference call is about self-determination. But it reads, can two or more self-differentiating culture groups coexist within a single political structure? The question may well seem clearly settled by the overwhelming factual evidence of contemporary international politics. For it is indeed a truism that political and ethnic borders seldom coincide. For it is indeed a truism, I'm reading that again, that political and ethnic borders seldom coincide. So what they're saying, brothers and sisters, is politics and race doesn't mix. You know, it cannot be no racial or political sharing of power or harmony when there are two different ethnic groups. And as their own scientists said with their tyranny of majority terminology, that it's an inherent weakness in democracy, because whatever the white group want, the majority wants, whether it's white or Black, whoever the majority is, whatever they want is going to take precedence. So whatever candidate there is must sell themselves to the majority, and when they get in power, they must represent the majority. That's not me and you, brothers and sisters. That's not us. So that's why Kamala Harris will never try to appeal, but she can appeal to Black people, but they can't do anything. She just said it. And none of them can do anything just for Black people because they will now isolate themselves from the majority who are white people who got them in power. You need that majority to get in power inside this system. So automatically it equals tyranny against and oppression against those who are minority. I hope we're understanding this because evidently we don't understand nothing about political science when we're talking about voting inside of a system that we are not the majority in. They're sitting there telling us in their own political science books that we're automatically going to be oppressed forever unless we become the majority, and we are a long way from becoming a majority, brothers and sisters. But there is an alternative. That's what this call is about. We're not here saying don't vote. I hate when people say don't vote, but they don't have an alternative for the people. There is an alternative. That alternative is what even Dr. King was discussing. How many of us, first of all, how many of us are evil? Raise your hand if you're evil. I'm not gonna raise my hand, I'm just saying raise your hand if you are evil. None of us raise our hands. But there are many of us admitting that we are gonna vote for the lesser of evil. I know the system is bad, but I'm gonna vote for the lesser of evil. You just admitted you're evil. You a devil. Yes, sister, you a devil. Yes, brother, you a devil. You're saying you're going to vote for admitting evil and you're submitting to evil. So I'm going to participate in evil. I'm going to vote for the lesser of evil. So you now submitted your will to evil. You got no, they don't have to come and put no 666 on your forehead. It's there already. It's already on your forehead. You are a devil. We are devils participating in a devilish system. When you participate in something, that means you validate it. You are part and parcel of it. We are part and parcel of the murder of George Floyd. We are part and parcel of the murder of Sandra Bland, of Korryn Gaines, of Tamir Rice, of Mike Brown, of Aiyana Jones. We are part and parcel. Matter of fact, we are the sanctions and the sponsors of those murders. We are the sponsors of wrongful convictions. We are, because we validate this system that has gotten us nowhere. Our champion who even got us these voting rights, we should take lessons from our champion. Who's our champion who got us these voting rights? The champion I'm talking about is none other than our brother, Dr. King. We like going over these passages and words from Dr. King, because Dr. King was a sincere brother who was brave. But mainly he was sincere, meaning that he would accept correction, self-correction. He would correct himself, even after making sacrifices and doing things that made him popular. He would turn around and say, that which I did that made me popular was actually the wrong thing. During a meeting in Frogmore, South Carolina in 1967, they were discussing the Poor People's Campaign, which was coming up some months later in 1968. It wasn't a speech to the masses of people, it was just a conference of his organization. The SCLC, they was discussing how they're going to move forward and actually win this thing. Inside that conference, he admitted that what they have been doing for the past 12 years had actually benefited none. And they were actually going backwards. So they must devise new tactics and get into a new era of action. This is what he said. We have moved from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights. That's what this call is all about, human rights. Number one principle in human rights is self-determination, but we'll go over that in a minute. Just going over this briefly. Dr. King said, now if we are to recognize that we are in this new era where the struggle is for genuine equality, we must recognize that we can't solve our problems until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. There again, we must not be fooled about this. We must recognize that if we are to gain our God-given rights, now, principalities and powers must be confronted and they must be changed. Let's go a little further, man. I don't have to give my twist to this. He's gonna give his own twist to what he was saying right now. I can look at that right now and tell you he's talking about revolution, not reform. He's talking about changing powers, period. That's why he started even saying black power. There's nothing wrong with the word black power. He said that in the same conference, because black people needed power, not trying to appeal to a white power to give them some justice, because it can't happen. Going further, this is what Dr. King said. Now, when we see that there must be a radical redistribution of economic and political power, then we see that for the last 12 years, we have been in a reform movement. We were seeking to reform certain conditions in the house of our nation because the nation wasn't living up to the very rules of the house that it has prescribed in the Constitution. Then after Selma and the Voting Rights Bill, we moved into a new era, which must be an era of revolution. I think we must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. You all talking about voting, our ancestors died for the vote, right to vote. This man paid the ultimate price with his life, and it wasn't for the right to vote. Matter of fact, they let him live and help push the Voting Rights Act that we so-called enjoy today. Then he realized that, hold on, that voting ain't gonna get us absolutely nowhere. The power must be confronted and changed. He said we must deal with civil rights. What was happening with civil rights during that day, or with human rights during that day? He said we must move into an era of human rights away from civil rights, because civil rights is what they dictate. Human rights is our first, for instance, our right to govern ourselves. Our right of self-determination is the #1 principle in human rights, meaning an oppressed people can simply stand up and say, look, I'm not voting for nobody. We're governing ourselves from here. That's what self-determination is. That's the foundation of human rights, of the human rights laws that Dr. King was talking about. That's why Dr. King was saying power must be confronted and changed. Change white power, change the whole structure, and put something in place for ourselves. That's the Dr. King that they assassinated. That's the Malcolm X that they assassinated. Malcolm X, look at Malcolm X's last words. He said, human rights, #1 principle of human rights is self-determination. So imagine if these great men who had the masses listening to them would have said, black people, let's stand up and govern ourselves where we at. And all the people would have stood up. Lawfully, they would have had to let the black people govern themselves wherever the black people lived at. They couldn't let men like that do such a thing to this great country, break it up and have black people having power to themselves. No, so they got rid of these men, and in turn, by getting rid of these men, assassinating them, assassinating Martin Luther King, especially the last one, they demoralized us. Demoralized means take the confidence away from the people. Look, they lose their fight and they even defect to the other side. In military, they say, demoralize the enemy. They'll stop the combatants. They'll stop fighting. The people will not even try to join the fight against the enemy. Matter of fact, some of the people will even defect to the side of those who are demoralizing the people, striking terror into them. Right after they struck terror into us by assassinating Dr. King, so much terror that his right-hand men joined the same government that killed their brother. Andrew Young and the others. John Lewis, who we crying about a couple of months ago, defected to the other side. Even though it was proven that the government, this is not a conspiracy theory. Dr. King's family won in court because they proved that the government killed Dr. King, the one that we claim we love, yet we're going to vote for the same government in a couple of weeks or so. They killed Dr. King. Same government that admitted they killed Fred Hampton. Same government that admitted that they destroyed all of our organizations. I have a picture here, but it made a mistake and closed out. But the picture had a picture of the same office where Dr. King was meeting with Lyndon B. Johnson at, or Lyndon B. Johnson was meeting Dr. King at in his office. Another picture of him meeting with J. Edgar Hoover in the same office, same man who organized more personally the assassination of King, who organized the destruction and sabotage of all of our Black organizations. And J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director with Republicans and Democrats, because they all had the same objective, and that's the maintenance of white power. So as Kamala Harris said, no, I can't do that for just Black people because I represent white power. And I don't blame them. I don't blame Kamala Harris. She's doing her job. Obama did his job. They represented the white majority. And the white majority care less about us having some monetary reparations. The white majority care less about police brutality against Black people. The white majority cares less about wrongful convictions. Go line up 100 white people you know and find 10 of them that will actively stand up against police brutality. Find 10 of them out of 100. Find 10 of them out of 100 that'll stand up for Black reparations. You can't do it. And that's just 10 out of 100. That means 10% of white people. You need way more than 10% of white people to side with you if you want the interests of Black people not only represented and spoken for, but actually executed. Won't happen, brothers and sisters. Will not happen. So you're voting inside of a system that's already admitting that you are defeated. They're admitting that. It's not me saying that. They say that she just said I can't do nothing for Black people only. Reparations is something for Black people only. Passing different laws is something that affects Black people only. So what are we fussing about? Okay, enough for crying out, enough for pointing out the wrongs of it. What can we do to make it right? I know some of us, when we say what we can do to make it right, we're so demoralized that we're gonna say, no, they can't gonna let us do it. We might well just pick a lesser of evil, you devil. That's what you're gonna say. Raise your hand if you could just stand up or just check a box and Black people be given monetary reparations. Raise your hand if you can check a box, we had free housings. Raise your hand if we all can get exonerated. If you can check a box and we all be exonerated. Raise your hand if we can just check a box and we have actual Black power and we have our own police force. The police be of us and for us. Raise your hand if we can erase poverty. You can check a box and erase poverty overnight. Everybody's raising their hand. That's what self-determination is. Self-determination is standing up and saying, look, we're going to govern ourselves where we live. We're not moving off in the desert nowhere. We're not moving all the way back to Africa. You can if you want to, but we're saying we're going to stand where we live, whether it be Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, or Mayberry. Wherever Black people live, you have the right. This is the number one right in law, to stand up and say we want to govern ourselves, we want our own police force, we want monetary reparations. Not we're going to give it to ourselves. Where we live, Black people, is worth 15 trillion plus just in real estate value alone. Where we live, 15 trillion plus. So why are we crying broke? Where we live, millions of empty properties lie idle. Where we live. So why are we homeless for? Why are we homeless? Why are we going to jail every day, wrongfully convicted? Why are we getting our heads busted by police? Brains blew out, hung by police, shot in the back by police. Because we consent to it happening. But it can stop in one day, brothers and sisters, we just rose up. I know, we can't do that. That's too extreme. We got to deal with something realistic. That's the definition of demoralization. You don't have any confidence that you can do anything. What if Nelson Mandela said the same thing? There would be no free South Africa. What if all the countries in the world, all the revolutionary people that stood up for theirs in all the countries in Africa, South America, Asia, would have said the same thing that we are saying in our demoralized state? What if Nelson Mandela would say, well, we can't beat them, I might as well vote for one of the other apartheid white boys, the lesser evil, the one that looks the best or talks the best, but still gonna throw us off. I was in South Africa and I met some of the families of those who were killed by the apartheid regime, throwing them off buildings while they're alive, throwing them out of planes into the Pacific Ocean while they're still alive. Same way they are killing us, torturing us, assassinating us in broad daylight. What if they would have said, we're gonna vote for the next person to throw us off a building, the one that looks better? There would be no Nelson Mandela we celebrated. There'll be no Robert Mugabe. There'll be no Fidel Castro in Cuba. There'll be none of these people that we celebrate who actually stood up. They would just say, hey, we accept defeat, we're just gonna keep voting. Nobody in the history of this planet has remained oppressed for 400 years and still voting, knowing that the vote's not gonna do anything. Nobody does that. Besides a defeated people, a demoralized people, ignorant people. Yeah, we're ignorant. We admit it. I used to be ignorant. I'm still ignorant of some things, but I'm not ignorant of the power that we have. I'm not ignorant of the fact that we have a right of self-determination. One more thing before we go to our conference call and end this Facebook Live. I wanted to share something else. Mind you, some of these things I'm sharing, these things come from universities. This right here is from Princeton University. It's called We the Peoples, the Strange Demise of Self-Determination. The author was saying how all of a sudden, the conversation of oppressed people moved from self-determination to things like voting, mainly voting inside of the same system that we feel we are oppressed under. 60 years ago, when the people felt like we were feeling, and all across the world, their topic was saying self-determination, We're going to stand up and govern ourselves. They cannot do us right. So we're going to do ourselves right, since the law says we have an option. Brothers and sisters, the law says we have an option, but the brother pointed out the fact, this is what he did on, he showed us in a graph, this is University of Princeton, showed us how, look, in 1960s, look at the topic, 1960, that's the tallest one right there, the 1960s. The tallest thing you're seeing right there is the 1960s. That's the discussion of self-determination. All of a sudden it dropped down to we hardly ever even mentioning the word self-determination now. We are actually not mentioning it in the United States. And the author said that this was done on purpose to draw the people's attention away from the right that they had, a right that was considered dangerous in the wrong hands. It was it was Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State. Let me see if I can even pull that up. It was Lyndon B. Yeah, it's on the same document, matter of fact. It was Lyndon B. Johnson's Secretary of State that spoke, not Lyndon B., Woodrow Wilson, Secretary of State. But Woodrow Wilson back in the 1800s and 19 teens and 20s, that really got the topic of self-determination on the worldwide board, basically, so to speak. When he was saying self-determination is not just a mere principle or phrase, but it is an imperative principle of action. And all the nations at that time, or peoples that were oppressed, started standing up and saying, look, we're going to govern ourselves. But even Woodrow Wilson himself admitted, hey, I didn't know people were going to respond to it like that. It was meant just for a few people that they wanted to benefit from having self-determination. He did not know that the whole world would start standing up for self-determination. And they all got their political independence. But his own Secretary of State warned him. This is his Secretary of State, acknowledged the power of self-determination, but lamented. This is his Secretary of State speaking. He said, the phrase is simply loaded with dynamite. He said, what a calamity the phrase was ever uttered. What misery it will cause. Then the author of this document asks, whose advice have we heeded? Has the Wilsonian moment extended to a century of self-determination, fulfilling the imperative principle, or have world leaders instead sought to terminate self-determination, or at least dismantle its dynamite? They admitted that the word self-determination, hey, if people start standing up for that, especially within our own borders, it can become dangerous. Now, Black people are going to want it and going to take their own power. So we got to get them from even knowing about the right of self-determination and discussing it. So we're going to influence leaders and pay off leaders and make Black leaders who would never speak about governing themselves, but only speak about voting for the lesser of evils. So now they gave us, instead of the dynamite of self-determination, we got a little bitty firecracker called voting that gets us absolutely nowhere, brothers and sisters. You're going to get nowhere with voting in this system. We just pointed that out. They admitted themselves that if you're a minority, keep on trying, you get nowhere. Candidate just told us that she can't do anything just for Black people, and she's telling the truth. She's not a liar. So we have an option, brothers and sisters. We have an option. The only option, that's to stand up and govern ourselves. Whatever city we are in, we can organize ourselves properly and just say, look, I don't care if it's the east side or west side, north side or south side, or even just 6 blocks like them white folks took over Seattle, 6 blocks in Seattle a few months ago. You have a right as Black people to self-determination. You can stand up and say, we're taking over this 6 blocks. We're taking over this east side or west side or north side or south side. We're taking over this whole city if you're Black like Detroit is. We're taking it over. We're going to give ourselves reparations. We're going to leverage the billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of assets to give ourselves reparations. We're going to form our own police force. We're going to let our brothers and sisters out of these prisons that you put them in. People like Kamala Harris put them in. That's called self-determination. That's what we have a right to do, but you have to, of course, organize yourselves properly in your cities. And that's what this call is about, us organizing ourselves in our cities. Not organizing to vote for a political party called Democrat or Republican or even independent inside of that system. It's called self-determination, where we determine whatever kind of course we want as Black people, whatever kind of political status we want. Independent, we can also get together and say, look, we want to choose to continue to be subjects in this system, or we can determine our own terms. That's what self-determination is. So you're going to choose that, or you're going to choose to remain in this position. We only have one thing to do, just like everybody came to the conclusion. All peoples on the planet came to one conclusion. They came to that sense that, hey, man, voting in this system that's of our oppressors is not going to work. Boycott not going to work. Trying to have economic empowerment inside somebody else's political power system won't work. They tried this. Everybody has tried. We've tried it, and it has failed. So let's choose our only option we have left. That's the only option they had left in every study of history. Nobody on the planet. I'm sure if you dig up the daggone history of Uranus and Pluto or whatever, the aliens never went through what we went through and still stayed stuck in the same mindset of voting for a lesser of evil, for another master, another oppressor. They voted on those planets as well, I'm sure. But we're the most foolish people known in probably the galaxy to be doing what we're doing, to even be discussing voting for an oppressor that we know is going to oppress us. Like I said, if we're ignorant, we don't know what hey, they're going to do something for us. But we know they're not going to do anything. We're saying we're going to vote for the lesser of evils. Come on, brothers and sisters. We are righteous by nature. We are not devils. Not Black people. We're not devils. But when you say I'm voting for a lesser of evil, you're saying I'm a devil. I know I'm not a devil. I know you're not a devil. So let's choose another option. Let's organize ourselves properly in our cities. Let's stand up and say, look, we're going to govern ourselves here. These are our police. This is our government. These are our property. This whole city belongs to us. So we're going to leverage, here's our reparations, our monetary reparations. We can do that. We're the last people to even think about this, but as we pointed out in the document, the scholars pointed out, Princeton University pointed out the fact that they purposely got us talking about voting instead of self-determination. Purposely got us talking about voting instead of self-determination. Instead of governing ourselves, we're talking about let's choose us. Come on, man, this is sickening. Intelligent people, you all are intelligent. I'm seeing scholars out there, professors and everything talking about voting for less of evil. Preachers in all faiths talking about voting for a lesser of evil. These are men of God. Talking about voting for men of Satan, women of Satan. Don't even have faith in the kingdom of God. So brothers and sisters, we're going to get to some concrete action. You're saying go to the website, iunite.app, iunite.app. We're organizing properly. Click the enlist button so we can organize ourselves properly in our cities. No, we're not trying to form an organization to be an organization in existence for 100 years and not achieve anything. Only organization we're after is government control so we can benefit our people. For the iunite.app, or just organize yourself in your city. Call, it's also an 800 number, 888-999-6530. You can call, you find that all on the website to talk to someone about how you can organize in your city. We gotta start somewhere. I know you demoralized, all right, we can't do it, it'll never happen. Many people, and I've been to many countries, those of you all who know me know that. Met with many leaders, some of those same leaders were under trees 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, under trees talking about how they're gonna get free. Of course, people are saying, all right, that's never gonna happen, but today, all of those countries are free. It began with a conversation. A lot of our slave revolts began with conversations on the plantation. Haiti began with a conversation on the plantation. So here we go with a big old plantation called America, and somebody's now discussing freedom. We're now discussing freedom. We're not organizing to get free. We're not demoralized to the fact that we're going to defect to the same system that killed Dr. King. that sabotages all of our organization's efforts. The same system that have us talking about voting instead of even knowing, we don't even know what self-determination is. Something has been done, brothers and sisters, so we must do something to correct this. We have to do something to stop the murders. The murders can't continue. They can't continue. They can't continue. We ought to be murdered for even letting it continue. If I was our children, I'd come from the future and kill us for condemning them to a hell that's to come if we don't do anything about it, brothers and sisters. Biden not going to keep us out of hell. Trump not going to keep us out of hell. Ice Cube, my brother, let's get together and have a real contract. That contract is self-determination. We're governing ourselves and our cities. Let's stand up and rise up and organize, brothers and sisters, like our lives depend on it, because what? Our lives do depend on it. My daughter's life depends on it. Your daughter, your sons, your children's life depends on it. They can come in here tonight, kill our children, kill us. We're gonna march for a minute, forget about it, and vote for the next president in 4 more years. The slaves, I began talking. Thank you all for being on this Facebook Live. We're gonna go to our conference call. You're welcome to join the conference call, 701-791-9664, because we are really organized. This is very serious. We're not organizing a voting party. We're not organizing to give people a rise to the ballot, to the polls. We're organizing to give people a rise to stand up and take over their cities, as they have a lawful right to. This is not anything illegal, unlawful. Matter of fact, it is illegal or unlawful for us to sit by and let this happen. This is in their law. They say it is not just the right of the people, it is the duty of the people to throw off any system that is oppressing them. So read your read your document, state constitutions. Read the founding document of America. Read your human rights laws, international human rights laws. They say it's the duty of the people to throw off anything that's affecting them. So we're not even answering our duty, so we should be locked up for that. So let's answer that call, brothers and sisters. It's just a natural call. So naturally, you're gonna look out for what you love. We don't know how to look out for what we love. So we vote for evils that's gonna kill what we love, but look good doing it, something more appealing to us. Biden is more appealing as a murderer than Trump is as a murderer. Both of them are murderers. This system is murderous, brothers and sisters. Let's choose not the lesser of evils. Let's choose the greater good. The greater good, according to their own law, is self-determination. Please join us on our conference call. You're welcome to ask questions, give your input. Tell us why we should vote. You may be able to convince us that we should vote for a lesser of evil. You may convince us to be evil as well and vote for a lesser of evil. You're welcome to join the conference call. Signing out, love you all. This is done out of love. We're not trying to ridicule anybody. We just have to know better so that we can do better, and we don't know better, brothers and sisters. So let's know better, let's love each other, but let's learn how to love ourselves properly. And if you are voting for lessers of evils, that means you hate yourself. Love you all. Salute. Signing out. Peace, Facebook.